It was late summer of 2017. After graduating from university, I wanted to get away from the city and clear my head. The fast-paced life in New Jersey had worn me down. Around that time, a listing I saw on Craigslist caught my eye. A quiet, isolated cabin deep in the forests of New Hampshire, by a lake. Monthly rental, electricity available, no internet. It was exactly what I was looking for. I threw a few essentials into the trunk of my car. Some clothes, a cassette player, plenty of books, and my dog, Bruno, and headed north. After a 3-hour drive, the paved roads began to disappear, replaced by a narrow gravel path surrounded by trees. Eventually, I saw the cabin, standing there as if it had been cut off from the world. It was a single-story wooden house right by the lake. There was a small dock out front. There were no other homes or signs of life nearby, just endless trees, silence, and a cool breeze off the lake. As the owner had said, the key was in the mailbox. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house was simple, but had a warm, cozy feel. One bedroom, a small kitchen, a living room with a stone fireplace. The windows were large, allowing a full view of the outside. And outside was absolute nothingness. The first day was perfect. I walked by the lake, read a few pages of a book, rolled around in the grass with Bruno. Nightfall came quickly. When the sun went down here, it got truly dark. No street lights, no neighboring lights, just complete, pitch-black emptiness. I lit the fireplace, popped in a Leonard Cohen cassette, and stretched out on the couch, a faint melancholy in the air. Bruno curled up at my feet. Around midnight, I noticed the first strange thing. One of the windows was open, but I was certain I had closed it. The large glass window facing the lake, it didn't even have curtains. It was slightly ajar, and a cool breeze was drifting inside. I got up and shut it, told myself it must have been the wind. But for some reason Bruno suddenly tensed up and started barking. He ran into the other rooms barking wildly, then sat by the front door and whimpered. I tried to calm myself down. New place, unfamiliar surroundings. Of course it would take time to adjust. But the next night, things got even stranger. It was midnight again. I was in bed trying to fall asleep. The stillness of the night was so deep, it was almost deafening. Until I heard it. Tap, 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 3 taps. A faint but deliberate sound coming from the back window. It was so clear it couldn't have been my imagination. I sat up in bed. Bruno immediately perked up and ran to the door, growling with his teeth bared. I looked out the window but saw nothing, only darkness. I grabbed my flashlight and quietly headed toward the back of the house. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I approached the window and turned on the flashlight. The beam danced across the tree trunks, but there was no one, just the rustling of leaves in the wind. Suddenly, I heard a twig snap to my right. I swung the flashlight in that direction, but again, no one. That night I didn't turn off the lights. Even Bruno didn't sleep. His ears stayed up, eyes fixed on the door the entire night. The next morning, I went for a walk along the lake. There was still a lingering unease inside me, but people always say that nature can make you forget everything. Maybe I really was alone after all. But then, I saw something. On the damp earth by the lake, I spotted footprints. More than 2. Barefoot. They weren't small. They belonged to a grown man. They were headed toward my cabin, then turned back into the woods. The footprints came directly from the lakefront, as if someone had come out of the water in the middle of the night and walked toward my home. And the most disturbing part, there were no return footprints. Bruno barked. Not at nothing this time. He barked toward the forest. I ran my hand through his fur. A chill ran down my spine. That was when I realized I wasn't alone in that house, and something was watching me. 3 full days had passed since the footprints. Since that day, I'd been restlessly pacing around the cabin. Bruno barely left my side. The nights had begun to feel quieter and longer. Every creak, every rustle echoed in my ears. Even a leaf stirring on the lake's surface made my heart race. But the worst part was that tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. I heard it every night now. Sometimes from the window, sometimes from the wooden walls of the cabin, as if someone, or something, just wanted me to feel its presence. It didn't try to break in, it didn't shatter glass, but it was there, every night, patiently, watching. On the fourth night, around 3 a.m., I woke up. When I sat up in bed, I realized Bruno wasn't beside me. My heart began to race. "Bruno," I whispered. No answer. The house was silent, only the dry branches outside scraping in the wind. Then, a crash came from downstairs. I rushed to the living room. Without using the flashlight, I turned on the small kitchen lamp to the left of the fireplace. One of the chairs had toppled over. But what truly chilled me was what I saw on the kitchen window. A fogged-up message written with a finger. "Are you awake?" My throat went dry instantly. My hand instinctively reached for the small camping knife in the corner of the kitchen. I shone the flashlight out the window, but saw only my own reflection staring back at me. Bruno was still gone. I opened the front door and called into the darkness. "Bruno! Come, boy!" "Bruno!" No answer. Only the distant hoot of an owl. I walked to the lakeshore. The moonlight shimmered across the surface, casting a pale silver veil over everything. I had just turned to head back when something on the dock caught my eye. Bruno's collars, both removed, placed side by side, slightly muddy, as if someone had stepped on them. I looked around. No blood, no fur, no signs of struggle, as if someone had gently unclipped them from his neck and taken him. By the time I returned to the cabin, I was no longer the same person. The peace of that nature retreat had vanished completely. I locked the doors from the inside, dragged heavy furniture in front of the windows, but I knew that thing was still out there, just as it continued doing for the rest of the night. Tap, tap, tap. The next morning, I decided to drive into town. There was a small town about 45 minutes away from the cabin, Willard's Cove. GPS barely worked out here, but I had marked it on the map. At first light, I packed a bag and got in the car. As I drove through the dense forest, I slammed the brakes at one point. Something was in the road. A small wooden figure. A crude human shape made of matchsticks. It had a tiny bell hanging from it, ringing softly in the breeze. I tossed it to the side of the road and kept going, but the knot in my chest only tightened. When I arrived in town, people stared at me strangely, like they didn't like outsiders. At the gas station, I asked the attendant about the man I had rented the cabin from. "Clyde Henley?" "Yeah, we know him," he said. "But you actually moved into that cabin?" "Yes, the small one by the lake. It has power, but some strange things have been happening," I replied. The attendant paused. Then, lowering his voice, he said, "He left that place years ago. His son had an accident there." "What kind of accident?" I asked. "A drowning," he said. "But the strange thing is, the boy's body was never found. They searched the lake for weeks. Nothing." I paid for my gas and stepped outside. The unease inside me was undeniable now. That cabin wasn't just isolated. It had a past, and that past was still there. When I got back, the sun was setting. I stepped inside and instantly lost my breath. Every single window had a message written on the inside. "Are you awake?" All of them. The living room, the bedroom, the kitchen. Each message clearly visible on the fogged glass. And some of them, much larger, as if written not by a child, but by something far bigger. Someone, or something, had been inside. That night, I picked up the shotgun. I didn't sleep. Bruno was still gone, but in his place was that cursed, ever-present sound that now haunted every night. Tap, tap, tap. 2:47 a.m. This time, the tapping came from the roof. And then, someone started walking upstairs. The footsteps upstairs were heavy, like those of a tired but determined man. The wooden floorboards creaked. One step, then silence. Another step. With every movement, the house seemed to breathe, groaning, sighing, shuddering. I was crouched behind the couch downstairs, clutching the shotgun, eyes fixed on the ceiling, my heart pounding in my throat. Bruno was still missing. I had followed his tracks to where the collars had been left, but found nothing beyond that. By now, I wasn't even sure if he was alive. But someone was up there, or something. My phone still had no signal. The Wi-Fi had gone out a few days earlier. At first, I thought it was just a seasonal issue, but now I knew someone had cut my connection on purpose. The footsteps upstairs stopped, right above my room. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the shotgun, and moved toward the stairs. I stepped carefully on each step. The wood groaned. The house whispered my presence with every creak. When I reached the hallway, the darkness swallowed me whole. My bedroom door was open. The light was off, but every cell in my body screamed that someone was in there. I placed my finger on the trigger. My voice trembled as I called out, "Whoever you are, come out. I'm armed." No reply. I slowly pushed the door open. Moonlight poured through the window, casting a dim glow on the corner of the bed. Something shifted on the wall. A shadow. In the corner, kneeling, was someone with their back turned to me. My breath caught in my throat. "Hey," I said. They didn't move. As I got closer, the details became clearer. They were wearing rags. Their hair was long and filthy. Their back was hunched. And then, in a raspy whisper, almost a groan, they said, "I didn't drown in the lake." Time seemed to freeze. I should have pulled the trigger, but I couldn't move. They turned their head toward me, but there was no face, just an abyss of black, where the eyes should have been, hollow sockets. Slimy moss hung from the chin. Water dripped from a mouth with no lips. Before I could even scream, the figure vanished, like mist. The room turned ice cold. My breath came out as fog. And then, written beside the window in condensation, another sentence appeared. "You called." By morning, I thought daylight might ease the fear. But this time, I found something else by the lake. Bruno's fur, stained with red. I nearly vomited from fear but held it in. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was a game. Something was playing with me. Not someone with limits, but something with rules. That day I tried to drive back into town, but the car wouldn't start. I popped the hood. Every cable had been cut. I was alone. That night, something else happened. It wasn't just a creature walking inside the house anymore. Whispers began, from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. At first I thought it was the wind. Then I pressed my ear against the wall, and I heard them clearly. "Stay here. Don't go. You're not alone. We're still here." The shotgun in my hands felt like a toy now. I wasn't the one setting the rules anymore. 3 a.m. The lights went out all at once. Total darkness. I couldn't see a thing. As my eyes adjusted, I heard a clatter from the kitchen. Then the living room light flicked on, by itself. And he was there, behind the glass. The same man, grinning, motionless, holding a knife. But this time, something was different. There were 3 more figures behind him, child-sized. They had no eyes, no mouths, but they were all staring at me. He slowly leaned toward the glass and wrote in the condensation, "The house is ours." The house wasn't breathing anymore. The walls had fallen silent, but the silence wasn't peace. It was anticipation. In the deepest hour of the night, time felt frozen. And me. For the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of dying. The man, whatever he was, behind the glass was still there. But this time, the children were with him. They stared at me with empty, lifeless eyes. And the man? He wasn't human anymore. The grin on his face felt like a mask stretched over something wearing skin. I turned the lights off. Maybe not seeing was better. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "This won't end." This wasn't just a one-night thing. The house belonged to them now. I made it to morning. But with the morning came something else. A mailman. He noticed me as he walked around the yard and waved. I rushed toward him. He flinched a little when he saw me pale, sleepless, holding a shotgun, but asked calmly, "Everything all right, buddy?" I paused for a few seconds, then simply said, "This place, it's not what you think it is." He smiled slightly. "I know," he said. "I've only ever used this road to deliver to your house. No one else actually lives out here." Hearing that hit me like a knife to the gut. "What do you mean? What about the lumber yard, the neighbors?" He slowly shook his head. "This area was abandoned years ago. That house, yours, was condemned after a fire in 1990. It wasn't supposed to be lived in." I froze. But worse than the words was the change in his expression. His gaze shifted. His face became strange, and he slowly turned and walked away, as if he wasn't real, as if he were playing a role, or something else. Behind his eyes, I saw the same darkness. That night, everything reached its peak. At exactly 2:59 a.m., all the lights came on. Every room in the house lit up at once. And outside every window, those children appeared. They had no faces, but they began writing words into the fogged glass, all at once, on every window. "You are alone. You can't escape. We are with you." I grabbed my shotgun and ran to the attic. The rooftop exit was the only way left. I reached the balcony, and there, in the backyard, he stood, arms spread wide, as if he had been waiting, as if the invitation was finally complete. I raised the shotgun. Tears streamed down my face. I pulled the trigger, but nothing. The shotgun didn't fire. It was empty, and then I remembered. I had never loaded it, not once. Maybe it had always been just a game, of my mind, or theirs. I started to cry. In that moment, the door behind me creaked open on its own. A wind blew through the house. The whispers began again. This time, clearer. "We chose you. You called us. Now you belong to us," I screamed. But the sound only echoed inside my own head. It reached nowhere. Days passed, or maybe months. Time doesn't move here. The house is no longer silent. The walls speak. I do not. Sometimes people come. They look around, then leave. They say, "This house has been abandoned for years." But behind one of the windows, someone is always there. A silhouette, watching from the glass. A faint smile on the face, but the eyes, hollow. If you ever find yourself near an old abandoned house in Northern Maine, don't approach. If you see someone watching you from the window, back away. Never go inside, because we're here. And now, we can't hear your voice, but you will hear ours. Always.